Hello and welcome to TheNonProphets. This show is brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm your host, Jeff D. My co-host is Vic Farrow, and sitting in today for Mary McManamy is our producer, Russell Glasser. Hey guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Today's opening music was The Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead by XTC. We are live February 16, 2002. The Atheist Community of Austin is a non-profit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings Sunday mornings at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop at 307 West 5th Street at 10:30 a.m., except for the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at 11 a.m. in the Longhorn Room of Fur's Cafeteria at North Cross Mall. Our next lecture will be on March 3. ACA board meetings take place at 10, right before the regular meeting on the second Sunday of each month. Anybody in Austin who shops, or anyone who shops at the Randall's supermarket chain, which I guess is not limited to Texas, but I'm not exactly sure, if you give our nonprofit organization number 5158, you can have 1% of your purchases donated to the Atheist Community of Austin. The Godless Gamers is a spin-off group of the ACA. We have weekly meetings every Monday night at 7 p.m. at my place. ACA Happy Hour is Antonio's near Highway 35 and 183, again in Austin, Texas, every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. If you get there and don't see anyone else around, hang around for a bit because people trickle in as the night goes on. For more information about the ACA, you can call our voicemail at area code 512-371-2911 or visit our website at www.atheist-community.org. This is broadcast. The show is broadcast on Saturdays from 2 to 3 Central Time. I guess that's 3 to 4 Eastern on www.atheistnetwork.com. You can also hear replays of our show anytime by going to www.atheistnetwork.com or to the ACA website. We have a chat room. They have a chat room at Atheist Network where you can log in and chat with other listeners while the show is in progress, and occasionally we interact with people in the chat room, take questions or respond to comments, and so on. Again, the Atheist Network is www.atheistnetwork.com. And I should also mention the Atheist Network runs a large selection of really excellent shows, and they're all worth listening to anytime you're sitting at your computer with nothing else better to do. Let's see. Instances of slurs, defamation, or discrimination against atheists or other non-believers in the U.S. media can be reported to the National Atheist Ombuds by emailing ombuds@atheism.org. This organization is effectively an anti-discrimination league for atheists. If you send them a report, please include as many details as possible and a news source where applicable. Incidents will be reported to participating national and local non-theist organizations who have agreed to distribute press releases regarding the reported subject matter. There will be a creation-evolution debate on February... Wait a minute, I thought there was another... Okay, that's the creation-evolution debate that our group just went to that happened yesterday. I thought there was another one in Ohio or something. Maybe that was weeks ago. Wasn't there some other one in the...
There are lots of those going on. When I went looking for Durston's information, I found that he's a busy man. He's doing these debates all over the place.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to say a lot more about the debate that happened yesterday at the University of Texas later on in the show. There's a new atheist group forming in Virginia. More information can be found at www.atheistdominion.org. They meet at the Virginia Beach Central Library at 4100 Virginia Beach Boulevard between Independence Boulevard and Rosemont Road. Their next meeting will be tomorrow, February 16, from 1 to 3 p.m. in Meeting Room B. Eat More Christians t-shirts are available from www.cafepress.com/nogods. These are shirts with a parody of the Chick-fil-A advertising campaign. Chick-fil-A has 3 cows holding up boards that say eat more chicken because, like, the cows don't want to get eaten, so they want you to eat chickens. Well, the Eat More Christians t-shirts have lions holding up boards saying eat more Christians. Proceeds from the sales of those shirts, and I don't remember if we also have mugs and mouse pads and all that kind of stuff, but I'll check into that. Proceeds from any of those sales will go to the cost of running and promoting this fine program right here. Now we'll go to Vic with news.
Well, school prayer is a big issue, and it's up and running in a couple of states. The Washington Post on February the 14th reports that Calvert commissioners joined in an effort to reinstate school prayer. On Tuesday, I'm assuming this past Tuesday, the Board of Commissioners voted to draft a resolution similar to the one adopted in December by their counterparts in Washington County, Pennsylvania. That resolution urges all cities, I'm quoting, all cities and counties across the United States to join in an effort to reinstate prayer in the public schools by passing similar resolutions. Commissioner Linda L. Kelly, a Republican of Owens, made the motion that the Calvert County get involved, asked that the forthcoming resolution be shared with other area counties. Religion in the schools became an issue in Calvert in 1999 when a Northern high school student objected to praying during the graduation.
Oh, yeah,
quote,
I remember that.
Yeah, quote, "I don't think we're infringing on anybody's rights," said Commissioner Barbara A. Steinert, Democrat at large. You don't think. That's my main point here. You don't think. You are infringing upon somebody's rights when you're initiating school prayer, because you know that it's going to be a fundamentalist Protestant Christian version of prayer, which excludes Jews, Hindus, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, Catholics,
atheists.
I said atheists.
Oh.
All these people.
Twice as important.
Yeah, we're twice as important, so we get mentioned twice. Commissioner Robert L. Bobby Swan, a Democrat of Sutton's, agreed, noting that, quote, "We had prayer in school when I was a student, and I can't for the life of me see where it hurt anybody."
Yeah, well, where it's hurting people is check out what she is trying to do.
Yeah.
She is the product of that era, and it's her behavior that is the harm that comes from this sort of thing.
Commissioner John Douglas Perron, a Republican, said, quote, "Students have a right to prayer." And where is this right excluded? Tell me how there have been denied their right to pray because we don't have forced recitation of Protestant Christian prayers in public school.
Exactly.
This is a ridiculous statement to say that because we don't have prayers of a particular sect on a loudspeaker that they've been denied their right to pray. That's
religious students do have a right to express their religious beliefs, but the government does not have a right to make it its business to decide which religious beliefs are going to get expressed.
The St. Pittsburgh Times, February 13th. House passes school prayer bill. State House overwhelmingly approved a bill Tuesday that would allow student-led prayer at some school events despite warnings from opponents that it could exclude religious minorities. They don't care, apparently.
Yeah, you know, the reason why we're getting so many of these things in the news right now is this is the wave of reaction from September 11 that is now coming to fruition.
Well, here you go.
That's what it is.
Representative,
an event which, ironically, was caused by a
religion.
state which has religion instituted.
What I'm saying is, let's not get too worried about this wave, this particular sudden upswing in these kinds of things.
I am worried about it because these waves have lasting effects.
They all get shot down. All these things are going to go through the courts, and they're all stop. And when the impetus from September 11 ebbs, and none of these things have made it in law, and none of them have survived challenge, then it's going to go away.
We have the potential of three Supreme Court seats being reassigned by our current president. They could come available during this particular presidency.
Of course, we have to fight them, right? We have to fight all of these. But there's no. All I'm saying is the fact that we're getting so many of these now is because of September 11. You had a steady stream of them always, right? And they all get shot down.
A bill sponsor, Representative Wilbur Holloway, said the aftermath of September 11 terrorist attacks is the right time to encourage students to pray. This is not intended to advance or endorse any religion or religious beliefs, said Holloway. What do you mean it's not? Come on.
Yeah, what is that other than an support for religious belief? What is that?
Well, there are some opponents. Representative Mark Weissman, a Democrat of Parkland, criticized the, quote, Taliban rhetoric of Bill's supporters and said that we're trying to force your religion on my children. And he's quite right. This is exactly what's going to happen.
I wonder how these people would react if there was a New Age movement that said prayer itself directly affects reality and that it doesn't have an intermediary of God. It's magical power that human beings have. I wonder how they would react.
Oh, my. I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
But in a surprising quote from Jeb Bush, who hasn't had time to review the legislation, but questioned whether it was needed in light of the Jacksonville ruling. Quote, I'm not sure what the difference here is compared to what already exists, and I'm not sure we need to pass a law if it's already allowed. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Wow. A rational Bush.
Well, you know, hey, Bush did mention atheism or non-believers at that prayer thing.
Yeah.
But his speechwriter. Well, I should say speechwriters.
That made the national national prayer breakfast not a violation of the Constitution because he threw a bone to atheists.
And no less than two places, a federal appeals court has agreed to revisit a 12-year-old controversy sparked by the Mount Soledad cross. And I didn't get from this article where the hell Mount Soledad is, but apparently there's a 43-foot cross there. The 11 judges in the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals will rehear legal arguments in the case which question whether the city acted properly in selling land around 43-foot tall symbol. This action was brought by an atheist named Philip Paulson and argued that the deal was rigged in favor of the Mount Soledad Memorial Association, which had built and cared for the cross for nearly 50 years. Paulson's attorney, James McElroy, and the American Civil Liberty Union asked the Ninth Circuit Court to reconsider the panel's decision, arguing in part that the panel had misinterpreted California's Constitution. There's another cross that's being revisited under the same circumstances, San Francisco Mount Davidson, obviously in San Francisco. But I don't know where the other cross is at.
Isn't there another giant cross that some moron's trying to put up in Michigan?
Oh, yeah. This is like, it's going to have a 60-foot Jesus on it. I mean, it's going to be huge. It's a monster. And,
well, that's fine, because when the Taliban finally takes over the United States after Christianity, then they can fire their bazookas at the giant Jesus.
Yeah, hopefully the giant Jesus doesn't come to life and stomp all over the city like in that one Simpsons episode.
Yeah, the Simpsons episode inspired by the vision of, who was that televangelist?
I don't know.
That had the original vision of the 900-foot Jesus.
No, it wasn't a Jesus. It was just like icons breaking off all over America and smashing things.
Oh, okay.
And it was one of the Halloween episodes.
There it is. A page of mine has disappeared. I'm trying to find out whether my story's half done here. The Virginia House voted against wife rape. The House delegates gave preliminary approval today to a bill that would allow Virginia to prosecute someone for raping a spouse. A vote that capped the wrenching debate on the rights of married women. The bill to strike the ban on prosecuting spouses for rape. A ban prosecuting spouses for rape. Oh, vestige, the sponsors said, of the days when Virginia women were considered husbands' common law property, is contained in the legislation developed by the Attorney General Jerry W. Kilgore, a Republican, that would broaden state laws against the... Yeah, it would broaden laws against domestic violence. Proponents of changing the Virginia rape law said that the state has a double standard for married and single women who are raped. A married woman can have her husband charged with crime only if the couple is not living together and she is physically harmed.
Wait a minute. House votes against rape. 10 Commandments bill.
They lumped these two stories together and I separated them. Okay. They also have, but I think this voted in favor of allowing public schools to prominently post 10 Commandments and excerpts from secular historical documents.
What does it say about women in the 10 Commandments?
Which one?
The one about not coveting your
don't cover your neighbor's
property.
Yeah.
And lumps women under that property. Of course, these two stories go together. This is, these two things are directly contradictory. They are claiming that the Ten Commandments is the basis for our laws. And well, in this case, it is, because the law here is that a married woman is the property of her husband.
Yes.
And
the Bible explicitly
if Christians
states
want to
that
find
another
specific
property
examples of the Ten Commandments being implemented in law, that's an example. And we're finally getting rid of it.
Yeah. And so
just as these morons
secular law
try to get the Ten Commandments
is more moral than this Bible law. But some Republicans and Democrats predicted that the proposed changes would enable women fighting divorce or child custody cases to falsely claim that they were raped by the husband to gain leverage in the dispute. People who would otherwise be the salt of the earth are completely nuts in divorce cases, said Delegate Kenneth R. Melvin, a Democrat.
I do love these names.
A criminal defense lawyer who offered the amendment and the House floor. Someone can say I was raped 3 years ago and has to be investigated. Well, there is a statute of limitations.
Yeah.
And I believe that's about 2 years.
What's it?
I don't know. Right. It may vary from state to state, though. So.
I understand why this is a problematic issue. But, on the other hand, just because you got married does not mean you give your partner carte blanche to do whatever the hell they feel like.
Right. You married a person. You didn't marry a vagina. You didn't buy a vagina, I should say. I nixed that story because it was relevant. That's the rest of that.
Russell, do you want to jump in, or should I go with some of my news?
I've got a couple of things that relate to intelligent design.
So let's hold that off until we get to that segment of the show,
okay?
Which we will be at real soon. I've been in recent weeks. I've been doing. And by the way, I was gone last week, and I want to thank the crew for doing an excellent show last week in my absence. I finally had a chance to listen to it after I got my network problems straightened out and I'm able to download faster and actually enjoy listening to.
Just so that you don't feel neglected, it took 3 of us to make up for you. We had 5 people
but it was an excellent show. Good work all around. Thanks to Martin and Charles and who else was here that
stepped in.
I know
there was like 6 of us actually talking at one time.
Yeah. Well, it really worked. You did a great job.
We had fun with that one.
Mary was here.
Mary was here.
Yeah. And Mary, of course, is not with us this week. She's out of town.
Of course, I came and got your regular announcements and tried to read through them without actually having read through them first.
Yeah.
Well, I butchered that one up.
You did fine, Vic. In recent weeks, I had started a segment, which we only did twice, but you guys kind of carried it last time, too, of crimes by theists.
Yeah.
And, as important as I think that is for everybody to understand that there is no evidence that religiosity makes people behave better, it's really not kind of not to the point. I would rather talk about the advantages of atheism and the good points of an atheistic worldview and victories against the abuses and extremist actions of religions. So let's try some good news this week. Krishnas to file for bankruptcy. A spokesman for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has confirmed that several of the movement's U.S. temples are to file for bankruptcy later in February to avoid legal action that they say could close them down. A suit for $400 million has been filed in Texas state court by alleged victims of abuse. Oh, wait a minute. I thought I wasn't going to do any more crimes by religious people. But in this case, it's the entire religion paying for the abuses of its representatives, and so I think this is still good news. Alleged victims of abuse in the temple's schools in the 1970s and 80s, saying they suffered rape, sexual abuse, physical torture, and emotional terror. Anuttama Dasa, ISKCON communications director, told BBC News Online that legal costs for fighting the suit could bankrupt the movement anyway, even if it wins the case. Well, yay. Myrtle Beach. Anybody know where that is? Florida?
That's Myrtle Beach is South Carolina.
South Carolina?
Yes.
City Council held a closed-door meeting Tuesday to talk about giving money to local arts programs, and when the meeting ended, a Christian music festival that had applied for funds had been cut from the list. Though they won't say if the closed session led to their decision to drop the event, called Beach Fest, city officials said it isn't appropriate to use public dollars for religious festivals. Quote, "We don't believe we should be in the business of funding religion," unquote, said city manager Tom Lath. Two other programs that received city funding also have ties to churches, but council members said those events aren't overly religious like Beach Fest. Yay, another victory. Gun, creation bills die in legislature. This is from Valentine's Day. Olympia, Washington. Two controversial bills championed by State Senator Harold Hochstatter, who we talked about in recent weeks, are dead. One allowing public school staff to carry handguns, and the other banning the teaching of evolution in state schools. The gun bill allows public school teachers, administrators, and school staff to possess loaded handguns for their own protection and for the security of others in their buildings. Oh. That's right. The way to stop gun violence in schools is make sure there's a whole lot more guns in there. Yeah. Hochstatter contends students and staff can be better protected in the event of an incident with armed school employees. He also argues an armed staff will be a deterrent to young people thinking about harming their fellow students.
And goes with that.
No, it will be an example set by the staff that a good thing to do in life is carry a gun around.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with armed, licensed police officers in a school, but this idea of that if you arm all the teachers, then it'll be a safe place. Is that old American that an armed society is a peaceful society? Right. No, an armed society is a terrified society.
Yeah. Now that was a new craziness. We didn't talk about that thing before. That bill. We talked about the bill banning the teaching of evolution. Hochstetter said the theory of evolution is not compatible with the state and federal constitution, which acknowledges God as the creator and giver of unalienable rights to constitutions.
The state constitution is not compatible with the national constitution.
Yeah, he says federal constitution. Of course, the federal constitution says nothing about God as the creator of unalienable rights to humans. Quote, "Some people really wonder why I introduced those bills, but sometimes to really get a public discussion about the issues, you have to wind it up and turn it loose to see what happens," he said. Well, here's what happened. The bills failed to get a public hearing before the State Education Committee and didn't make a Friday deadline to move from committee to the Senate floor. Hochstatter is the ranking Republican member of the State Education Committee. His own committee, he never got a hearing for the bills that he proposed. So, more victories all around. Yay, secularism. Let's see. By the way, if you're enjoying our show and want to receive email reminding you to tune in live each week and chat with other listeners between shows, you can join our reminder list by going to groups.yahoo.com/group/atheist_non-prophets radio show. And we want to thank Wendy Britton for volunteering to set that up and for moderating it. Once again, that chat room, which is running right now live if you're listening to us live, and running anyway if some other show is on and you're just listening to this as a recorded past episode, is at www.atheistnetwork.com, the fine station that carries our show. All right, so now we got all that out of the way. Let's talk about this debate that happened here in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas. The title of the debate was, "Which is the better explanation for biological diversity, intelligent design or biological evolution?" And what were the names of the two
Kurt
Kurt Gersten
was the creationist, although they don't like to call themselves creationists anymore.
Right.
And Sahotra Sarkar, who's a local professor of philosophy at UT, was the evolution guy.
Right. I didn't look up Sarkar's background, but does he have any biology in his background at all?
No, he has he has bachelor's in a couple of sciences. One of them is physics. His master's or his PhD is in philosophy of science, which I wouldn't totally discount because a lot of really good people like Daniel Dennett and Robert Pennock are philosopher of science guys.
Right. Okay. Well, Thurston's background has two BSs in, one is in engineering, the other is in math. I looked it up and sent it to our list, but I don't have it with me. And his master's is in philosophy, physics and engineering. Yeah. And his master's is in philosophy. It didn't say philosophy of science; it just said philosophy. He currently is sitting on is an administrator of some sort for this New Scholars Society. Yeah. So I went looking for the New Scholars Society to see what that's about, and guess where I found it? On the Campus Crusade for Christ webpage.
I think that's actually not their official webpage. I found a page which was linked from that page.
Oh, when I looked it up in the Google search sheet, it came up with Campus Crusade for Christ. Wow. And then I went to that page. There was a link down to another one of the it was sectioned off on different things. One of them was the New Scholars Society, and on the thing that I sent to the email, it had a little blurb that cut and paste from what their mission was, and that was to basically get Christians professors to utilize their position in schools to promote the Bible.
Now this is significant because one of the claims that Durston made during the debate was that this so-called intelligent design argument is not religiously motivated, and that it is entirely separate from the question of what would the nature of a hypothetical intelligent designer be.
Right. But, and this claim is not unique to Durston. It's endemic of the entire intelligent design movement that we're not really talking about God or Christianity. At least that's what they say publicly.
That is what they say publicly, but I know you have even more background on this. Oh, yeah. Also the fact that he's involved in this he was related to or supported by the Campus Crusade.
But he used to be, and this is the thing he in his past, was the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C.
And what did he do for them?
He was a philosopher of religion or something like that. It's
okay.
I should have wrote this stuff down because I sent it to the list and I figured, well, it's here. I can pull it up.
He's got his own website. Do you have the...
I didn't pull up his website, no.
Okay. He doesn't... I couldn't find one.
Supposedly, Sarkar was viewing his website.
Sarkar has a standard university website, links to all his projects.
Yeah, and but Sarkar was referring to looking at Durston's website. Yeah, and I didn't get that. All I got was the UT Texas .edu.students.hos, which doesn't work.
Okay, so he was a philosopher for the Heritage Foundation. And what's the Heritage Foundation?
That's a religious think tank. Yeah, it's all about religion.
Anything else in his background we should know about?
That was what I found in his background. It was this morning when I got up and I started looking for him, and I figured, oh, well, okay, he is a religious person promoting religion, and he's doing just exactly what everybody who's looked at ID seriously has said. It's creationism in disguise. They've covered up all the creation stuff, all the God stuff, all the religious aspects of it, and they're pushing it as this scientific theory that shows that an intelligent creator must be necessary for there to be biological diversity.
Yeah. Now we should outline the argument made by Mr. Durston. Russell, is that part of your... I know you prepared a bunch of material on this. Do you want to take that, or should I go through and just summarize what the argument was?
You go ahead. I've got it on Microsoft Word somewhere, but if I look it up, then it'll slow down the broadcast.
Durston's intelligent design argument boiled down to two main points. Okay, one was that it was possible to distill down through a mathematical formula how much, functional data, functional information was embodied in a thing, and that and that above a certain threshold, it was clear that if you had an amount of functional information above a certain point, that you were beyond the amount of functional information that could be generated by nature. And he had the number 70 for whatever this.
Yeah, that was the absolute limit of the number of bits of information that could be generated by natural forces,
which he arrived at solely by giving us a few examples of things from nature that he claimed he had applied this formula to, and the numbers that were produced through the application of this formula to those things in nature, and showing how all of them fell below 70, right?
Right. Of course is begging the question, because by claiming that nothing can be naturally produced that has less than 70 or more than 70 bits,
right,
he assumes that nothing we observe was produced by natural causes,
right,
which is what he's trying to prove in the first place.
Right, exactly so. He's assuming as a conclusion. His other thing was a frequent, repeated, almost continual reference to some papers that I'm not even sure these are scientific papers. I mean, there was no mention of where these studies had been published. Right.
Right.
Reference to some papers by some guys. You have
this
some
guy
names.
whose name was Shannon. His last name's Shannon. He kept referring to Shannon, and then there were two other mathematicians that had done some more funny. This guy went on this long string of these
I noticed
funny
he didn't use
mathematical
Dembski, which is probably where most of his math came from.
This long string of some funny math, and I doubt seriously if there were 10 people in that room who understood the math.
Right.
But
Sarkar did.
Sarkar has also got some background in informational theory.
Right.
So he was able to go one-on-one with the informational theory artists, and they did that at one point. They actually just went back and forth with each other. Sarkar pointing out that he was basically leaving out portions of the equation that changed the outcome.
Yeah, which was not as big a deal to me as the fact that how he was applying these formulas was a complete and utter mystery. He gave, for example, the idea that if the SETI program was to pick up a sequence of the first 10 prime numbers,
probably more than 10.
I think he said 10. But that's the number he used, right? He said if they picked the first 10 prime numbers, then he applied his formula to those first 10 prime numbers and came up with some big number, right? He said, well, this number is way above 70, and therefore that would be proof that these 10 prime numbers were generated by something other than nature. Somebody's saying
Blanco. Blanco was one of the names, and
we're getting some further information.
Claude Elwood Shannon. That's the guy who had the equation. Blanco was another one, and there was a third. I'm thinking that there was 4 people he was quoting from, but maybe only 3.
And Martin's telling us it's 20 prime numbers. That's fine. There's some sequence of prime numbers. He said if SETI picked these up, then we can apply this formula, and since the result we get from the formula is way over 70, that would be proof that these had to come from intelligence rather than from nature. And there's all kinds of problems with that. I mean, because all through the rest of his discussion, he's talking about functional data, right? Because, of course, you could just take all the information it would take to describe a grain of sand, and you get way more than 70 bits of data out of it, right? So it had to be functional information. Well, how a sequence of 20 prime numbers has functionality, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it's incredibly subjective. It was clear that it was incredibly subjective the way he was applying the formula in the first place. And then on top of that, Sarkar is pointing out that he's dropping pieces of the formula in his discussion, and the guys tried to excuse his decision to drop those pieces of the formula. Well, that's all fine, but
didn't do it.
But
he never showed the formula.
He never showed it again. He just was turning his computer over. It's right here. It's right here.
Yeah, but if the numbers he's plugging into the formula are pulled out of his ass in the first place, which they appear to be, then who cares? Then it doesn't matter whether he's applying a formula accurately, or he's applying the accurate version of the formula or not, because it doesn't matter.
Right.
He's plugging in whatever numbers he wants.
It's a common tactic of creationists of all stripes that they think they prove something untrue simply by creating equations, by pure math.
Right.
And the thing about math is that you can only prove, I mean, essentially in mathematics you can only prove tautologies. I mean, you know, you can prove that some things are equal to some other things, but that doesn't say anything about the assumptions that you plug into. I mean, you know, you can present an equation saying that 2 + 2 = 4, but, you know, if you take 2 cups of sand and 2 cups of water, you don't get 4 cups of soggy sand.
Right. Right.
One thing that hit me was during all this thing about, you know, you can't produce more than 70 bits of information. One, I didn't get how these bits of information related to biology, and I didn't get how he could prove that you cannot produce more than 70 bits of information through a natural process.
No, he just
That was the big sticking point.
He just asserted it.
He just asserted you can't do it, and without giving any explanation as to why. I mean, I can understand if he said you can't give 70 bits of information out of a natural selection. I know I got the same cough.
That was just from soda going down the wrong.
Oh, well, mine is actually a cough, so I'm here infecting you guys with my illnesses.
Oh, I had mine last week.
Oh, well, I probably got it from you. Anyway, then he went on to this phony thing about differences between micro and macro evolution.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I do want to get back to that.
Okay.
And that, whoa. No, let's take it now.
All
because I want to mention that they handed out cards at the lecture, so you could write down questions,
right? And
those questions were read at the end. And one of the first questions I wrote down, which I ultimately didn't hand in because I came up with a better one, was he admitted that microevolution happens.
Yes, he did.
Right. And then his whole argument was, well, macroevolution is above the threshold. I wanted to hear him show how. Take the most extreme case of microevolution that he is willing to admit to, right, and quantify that with his little formula. I find it hard to believe. He was on record apparently saying that a tiger and a lion may be related because he considers that within the bounds of microevolution, right?
Yeah. How many bits of information?
But how many bits of information would it take to make a difference between a tiger and a lion? I'm betting you it's way over 70. Yeah. And if that's true, then he is refuting his own argument by agreeing that a thing can happen naturally that goes way above his 70 bits of information threshold.
Yeah, well, then he went over that macro evolution, which was the old creationist.
Right, he had those nice little 3D graphs with the plateaus.
But did you catch the part?
And that's the second thing. I've only mentioned one of his two main points, and that plateau thing is the second one, which I want to get into.
But did you catch the part that this guy who's not promoting religion went into quoting Genesis? Right there at the beginning of his speech.
Yeah, he did, but he did it historically, which is bizarre. Yes. I did notice that. Why pick that?
Yeah.
And in fact, I bet that's not true. What he said was, we have historical records of microevolution, of breeding, of animal breeding.
Yeah.
And he picks Genesis as his source of that historical data. I bet you there's references to animal breeding from Sumerian texts that go back way earlier than that.
Oh, yeah.
I bet you anything, but
the whole point was he was denying his religious motivations while referencing the Bible and the awe of nature and the obvious. He even made a statement at one point that ID is an empirical fact. So, okay, how?
Well, by pulling a number out of his ass of 70, saying that is the threshold. Anything above 70 bits of data that you get by applying this formula has to be intelligent design. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't know. Just because he says so, apparently, right? And therefore he's got a yardstick. Now, the other prong of his two-pronged attack was his reference to these studies by those scientists whose names we went over, but by those guys whose names we went over. I have no idea if they're scientists. I have no idea if these are scientific papers. I have no idea where these papers were supposedly published. He gave us no background on any of that. He just kept hammering on their names, repeated them like 20 times during the course of the night.
Oh, yeah. I would like to interject, which is why these guys like public speech debates rather than scientific written debates.
But this was very different from what I'm used to. I'm used to a scattergun approach by creationists, where they say a zillion different things and it's impossible to knock them all down. This guy really was very focused on just a few points. Anyway, so
creationists
supposedly
have learned their lessons from their past failures.
Maybe
they're redesigning.
They're evolving.
But they regularly win the public perception of debates by using that scattergun.
Yeah, but they lose in getting their stuff taught in school, and they lose in the courts.
Right. But anyway, these studies, these papers, supposedly showed that it was wildly improbable for genetic evolution to go from one peak of optimization or one peak of functionality from the way genes work to a different one. And I don't really understand his deal, but Sarker basically just said, well, that's not true. You're only, you're asserting that, but we have all kinds of evidence that it really does happen. You're not looking at the size of the populations that it would take, that we have in nature that are all breeding at once. We have so many chances for this kind of thing to happen that it's no big surprise at all. In fact, a great thing that Sarker did was show how there was an estimate on how many generations it would take in how many generations it would take in order to get as much genetic change as there's between us and like paramecium or something, and show that was like less than one generation a year would be necessary. And then he goes, well, that seems sort of surprising to those of us that are human beings, where we consider 20 generations or so, or 20 years or so to be a generation. But for 95% of history, life was single-celled organisms that, many of them have life cycles of about, or generations of about 15 minutes. And it just blew the intelligent design guy argument out of the water. There's so much breeding, so much reproduction going on, so many chances that just, as improbable as the intelligent design guys want to say it is for these things to happen, there's plenty of chances for it.
Yeah, and his probability, did a wording of the argument from incredulity, that the probability of this stuff happening by natural selection was just so great, that 10 to the 20th to the 15th to, that big funny math thing.
Right.
And Sarkar really did point out that, that your probability statistics are irrelevant. It just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. The intelligent design guy quoted some figure, 1 in 10 to the negative 157
I've got
or something.
That somewhere.
Well, he got it written down. He said that is the least probable a thing could be in order for us to expect it to happen once in the entire history of the universe, right? And Sarker responded by saying, okay, suppose we have 100 people in the auditorium here. If I asked you to each go home, take a deck of cards and pull out 30 and at random and bring them in, we would have all that taken together would be a piece of data that was as unlikely as this guy said could only happen once in the entire history of the universe. We can get stuff that that unlikely to happen at the snap of a finger.
Yeah, here it is. 3.3 times 10 to the minus 141 is the probability of crossing the sequence space.
Yeah. What is it with this non-folding, non-function sequence space and all this other?
I don't know,
because the funnels and I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
What he meant by functioning was unclear.
Yeah.
How he was applying his formula was unclear. Where he got that 70 bits of data threshold was unclear.
Another thing I wrote down a little later in the debate was, as long as he's just making up these probabilities, why doesn't he just say, the odds of Sarkar winning this debate are 10 to the minus 13749270032, so I win.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah, there was a lot of this just absolute ambiguity about everything he was talking about. And half the time he was a little on the soft-spoken side. His mic wasn't high enough.
And monotonous.
And he had this nice computer PowerPoint program with the projector and the pretty little pictures that were all nice and neat done on the computer. And he was...
Yeah, he clearly had a budget behind him.
Yeah, he had a budget. And Sarkar was there in jeans and an overhead projector.
Right.
And his stuff was more understandable. I understood what Sarkar was saying. I didn't have a clue as to what the ID was saying.
Right.
And Sarkar went through the history of evolution and all the different scientists that have contributed to starting back with went through Lamarck and Darwin, and then up through more modern scientists that have contributed to the theory and explained it. And
Personally, I thought that part was a little weak, actually.
Well, he had to go so fast, so because he's had a time limit. But it was basically understandable. Was my point here.
Yeah.
And what Durston was saying made no sense. Even if you're trying to convince people that there's an intelligent designer, hitting him with a bunch of fuzzy math isn't going to do it.
Right. I mean, his entire argument boiled down to an attack on evolution. He offered nothing. My friend Denis was there, and the question that he wrote on his card was, please explain how this intelligent designer interferes with the normal flow of natural law, that if natural law cannot account for this supposed design. And unfortunately, that question wasn't asked.
Yeah.
But that's a darn good question. I mean, the intelligent design guy offered no explanations. All he offered was argument from incredulity. I don't believe that that this much data can be accounted for by natural processes. Therefore, it must have been intelligently designed.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that ain't science.
No. Well, did you get that? I mean,
he did say the designer is no longer interfering.
Yeah,
I almost got the impression that he was a deist.
Yeah, it was that. Yes, I agree. It was sort of a deistic angle in it.
Now, making up his own version of the scientific method didn't help his case much either. Because he specifically said that you had to come up with a scientific method.
A scientific
method. Well, I'm sorry, but there already exists a scientific method that has been used for generations, and it works.
He didn't come up with a scientific method. He came up with a yardstick and a definition.
Right.
That's all. He didn't justify his yardstick, and he didn't justify his definition.
And he called it a scientific
completely
method.
Out of his ass.
And he got challenged by one of the
yes,
on that very thing.
And that angered me because that he was asked by that guy, if you recall, to explain how it is, what is scientific about this way that he's doing it. How would he attest to find out that it's true, right? And the guy basically said, well, if we found examples of nature producing things this improbable, why then we would have proof that there wasn't intelligent design.
No, he said we would have proof that it wasn't necessary.
Right.
Which is not what was asked.
But of course, then later on in the discussion, when an example is given of an unlikely thing being produced by natural forces in a laboratory, his excuse was, well, that was in a laboratory, so that was intelligent design. And the professor who asked him that question should have known that that's where he was going to go. I knew that's where he was going to go, but he didn't ask the follow-up. He should have said, so if we produce stuff in a laboratory, is that going to count? Right? So not only do we have to find nature producing this kind of stuff that he would agree is improbable, we'd have to catch it doing it in nature. We couldn't do it under controlled conditions. Because if we did, then it's us. It's not nature.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now, the question that I did write that did get through, and that's another sore point about this debate, because there were you could submit questions for either of the two guys.
Slow balls.
Very poor questions asked of the intelligent design guy, but I was happy that mine got in, and it was the last thing he was asked. Okay, I asked, given that I asked how many bits of information would it take to describe this intelligent designer that you hypothesize, and where did that information come from, given that, according to you, it cannot exist without intelligent design, right? And he basically said, first he said, well, there's this principle that says that that you have to that anything can only be designed by a more complex thing, right?
Yeah.
Which hurt his argument, because then he said, "But I don't have to explain where it came from, right?
Because God did it."
Well, his entire argument boiled down to, because there are things that science has not explained, therefore we need intelligent design to explain those things, right? The more information you have unexplained, the worse your theory is. But by postulating an intelligent designer, he's just postulated a thing that, by his own admission, has to be more complex than everything else put together, right? The universe could only have been created by something that contains even more data than it does.
Right.
Right? And yet he says he doesn't have to explain it. His own argument was self-refuting, and I got into a very heated and ultimately,
extremely entertaining,
and ultimately angry debate, because I got really pissed off with this moron from the audience after the debate was over. I asked him flat out 4 times, right? Given that the intelligent design guy says that the more information that you don't explain, the worse your theory is, and given that the intelligent design theory postulates the existence of this infinitely large batch of information called an intelligent designer that it does not explain, right? Yeah. Is it not true that his own argument refutes itself? Right? Evolution leaves less unexplained than intelligent design does.
And of course, the guy responded by saying, "I can tell you're very religious about."
Yeah, his responses were to insult me by saying that I'm very religious, to say, "Well, if you were walking along a beach and you found a watch,"
and then everybody behind you simultaneously,
"Watch maker!" Oh man! And then the third time I asked it, he said, you mean more harder? He said, evolution. You mean random chance?
Yeah.
And the last time he said, well, it's easier to believe in a God than it is to believe in evolution.
Argument from incredulity.
He never once addressed my arguments. Okay. And after I had made it clear. Okay, I'm getting heated now.
Yes, but
after I made it clear that I didn't care.
The microphone levels are going too high.
Thank you, Mr. Producer. I'll get my voice down. After I made it clear that I didn't care, I didn't have a stake in which argument was right or wrong. I only wanted him to admit that, I wanted to show him and have him recognize that the argument offered by this intelligent design guy was self-refuting. And he wouldn't even address it.
Because he didn't understand the nature of your question. This guy was completely outclassed. He had no chance arguing with you whatsoever. He didn't know what he's talking. All his guy had was, Jesus loves you. I know this.
Yes.
And you challenged him on that one, too, because he was talking about, this incomprehensible thing. How can you explain yourself to an ant, but Jesus loves you? Well, how do you know that? If you can't comprehend this big, giant God in the sky, how in the hell can you make any assumptions of what he thinks? And he was,
Hey guys, we've got 5 minutes left. Can I provide my links? I'm not going to be able to read what was at them.
Yes, please.
Okay.
There is a wonderful, marvelous article about intelligent design on Slate this week. And I'll type that information into the chat room, but just reading it, it's slate.msn.com /? ID equals 2062009. I'll type that into the chat. But one of the
and that, by the way, we are keeping logs of these chat sessions
Yes.
on the Atheist Community of Austin website at www.atheist-community.org. So when you hear this, if you go to our website, you can actually read these URLs.
right. Another site. This just totally makes a pure mockery out of ID. This Slate article.
It's funny.
Another site that I think that anyone who's interested in intelligent design and how to refute it should read is the wedge strategy, which is actually all over the web. You can find it just by searching for those exact words.
The wedge strategy.
Yes. But basically, the point is, intelligent design guys claim that they're not trying to get God into the schools. They're just trying to acknowledge another possibility. But if you look at what their declared position paper is, written by Philip Johnson, who's sort of like the godfather of this whole movement, you'll see that he has a very specific plan that he's using, and he mentions the word Christian just all over the place. Just like this guy who debated last night, who, when we tracked down his websites and other speaking engagements, we found out that yes, he is.
He's a promoter
Of
of the
course,
Christian
he's a promoter
religion.
of Christianity. Anyway, one place you can find the wedge strategy position paper is www.antievolution.org/features/wedge.html.
And this is important information, folks. Take this down. Read these documents. Better yet, print them out and keep them in a notebook that you carry around in situations where you might encounter intelligent design guys. There is plenty of ammunition out there to nip this intelligent design nonsense in the bud. Now to lighten the mood for just the last couple of minutes of the show. On the way back from the debate last night, my friend Denis and I started joking about setting up a website that we might call Intelligent Redesign to cast doubt on the designedness of the universe by suggesting improvements. And here are some, what I'd like to do is ask our people in our audience to think of ways to improve the design of the universe, the design of our bodies or natural laws or whatever, right?
Yeah, for instance, I could use better back muscles that are more adapted to standing upright.
That's a good idea, yeah, that kind of thing. And I don't want to see silly things like it would be nice if everybody had, a cigarette lighter built into their chin or something. I mean, things that are biologically possible, but the fact that they're not this way shows that they're not as optimal as we might like them to be. Here are some examples. Having the human male penis ribbed for the pleasure of your mate. It certainly could have ribs on it, right? Yeah. It could be a little French tickler kind of thing, but it's not. Another one that I particularly liked, we talked about sexually transmitted diseases. How about sexually transmitted vitamins? I think that would be an improvement. If you can fit those things, please email them to us. Do we have an email address that we officially receive email at?
Atheist@atheist-community.org.
Atheist@atheist-community.org. That's our producer will get that, and he can forward it to us. And we'll talk about some of those suggestions next week. Thanks very much for listening to the show. We're out of time, and we'll be back next week. Tell your friends, your loved ones, your coworkers about this fine program, and have a great time.
Bye.